welcome. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Or, I might show up at your door. I'm just here to share some creepy stories, so sit back and enjoy. Disclaimer: the content presented in the video is purely for entertainment purposes only. The theories and stories discussed in this video are speculative and are not supported by any evidence or proof. Viewer discretion is advised. My shift started at 11 p.m. sharp, same as always. I was the overnight operator at KXRF 107.3, a small radio station that barely reached beyond our little town. The kind of station that played oldies and broadcasted local announcements. School closings, lost pets, church events. Nothing major. Most nights were quiet, which was how I liked it. The station sat on the outskirts of town, right where civilization met empty fields. It was an old, squat building with a single broadcasting tower stretching into the sky like a rusted spine. My only coworker that night was Jerry, the guy who handled programming schedules and occasional on-air segments. He was a heavy smoker and liked to step outside on breaks, no matter how cold it got. The night began like any other. I brewed a pot of stale coffee, checked the logs, and settled into my chair behind the control panel. The automated playlist was running smooth. Some Eagles, then Fleetwood Mac, then back to Eagles because our audience didn't like surprises. Then the emergency alert interrupted everything. A loud, mechanical beep filled the studio, cutting off Hotel California mid-chorus. The screen in front of me flashed red. Emergency alert system, National Weather Service. Old. We weren't expecting any storms. I adjusted my headset and leaned in. The robotic text-to-speech voice kicked in. This is an emergency alert, issued by the National Weather Service. Effective immediately. Do not look at the sky. Do not stare at the stars. Stay indoors. Keep your windows covered. This is not a test. Then another beep and silence. The emergency message ended as abruptly as it began, and Fleetwood Mac returned like nothing had happened. I frowned at the screen. Jerry, did you see this? Jerry was in the doorway, cigarette hanging from his lips, a deep line creasing his forehead. Yeah, he exhaled smoke. Weird, right? Never heard one like that before. I reached for my phone and checked the National Weather Service website. No alerts. Nothing on Twitter, nothing on any official channels. I refreshed. Still nothing. That's gotta be a glitch, I muttered. Jerry shrugged. Or a prank. Wouldn't be the first time some hacker messed with the signals. I wasn't so sure. The emergency alert system wasn't something just anyone could hijack. It required access to government networks, and even then, the messages were pre-approved templates. But this one, it was too specific. Do we report it? I asked. Jerry scratched his chin. Let's wait. If it's a real alert, we'll see it pop up again. That was good enough for me. I marked the alert in the station's log and tried to shake the weird feeling creeping up my spine. The next hour passed without issue. I kept an eye on the news, but nothing came up. No follow-ups, no updates. The emergency alert might as well have never happened. But then the callers started. The first one came in at 12:17 a.m. KXRF, this is Ryan, I answered. A woman's voice, shaky and urgent. Did you hear it? I straightened in my chair. Hear what, ma'am? The alert. The one about the sky. I glanced at Jerry, who was half listening while scrolling through his phone. Yeah, we got it here at the station. Did you? The stars aren't right, she whispered. I felt a cold pressure in my chest. What do you mean? They're moving. Her voice was barely above a breath, like she was afraid of being overheard. I turned to Jerry and mouthed, Another prank? He smirked but didn't say anything. Ma'am, are you sure you weren't seeing satellites? I asked, keeping my tone calm. There's a lot of them up there now. Starlink and… No, she interrupted. I know what satellites look like. The stars are moving in patterns, like they're shifting, rearranging. Pause. Then, quieter. I think they're watching us. I rubbed my temple. This had to be a hoax. some conspiracy nut messing with late-night radio. But there was something in her voice, something real. "Where are you calling from?" I asked. "Just outside town," she said. "Near the old gas station on Route 6. I pulled up a map in my head. That was about 10 miles west, nothing but fields and open sky. Before I could ask more, the line went dead. "Shit," I muttered, checking the caller ID. "Unknown number." Jerry chuckled. "You get all the weirdos, man." But my hands were cold, and my gut told me she wasn't making it up. At 12:43 a.m., we got another call. A man this time. Voice tense, borderline frantic. "You gotta tell people to stay inside," he said. "The alert, it's real. They're out there." "Who's out there?" I asked. He hesitated. I don't know. I can't explain. But my neighbor, he went outside, and now he's just standing there, staring up, not moving, not blinking." A shiver ran down my spine. I wanted to dismiss it. I really did. But that same pressure, that same instinct told me something was off. And then Jerry said, "Hey, look at this." I turned to his laptop screen. He had Facebook open, a local community group. The top post was from someone a few miles outside town. "Anyone else see that emergency alert? I swear to God, my husband went outside and hasn't moved in 20 minutes. Just looking up. Someone please tell me this is a joke." The comments were filled with similar reports. More people mentioning the alert. More people saying they saw the stars change. I swallowed hard. This wasn't just one caller. This wasn't just a prank. I reached for my coffee, but my hand was shaking. At 12:58 a.m., the emergency alert played again. This time, the voice was different. The robotic tone was gone. It was distorted, garbled. "Do not look at the sky. Do not look at the sky. Do not look at the sky." A harsh burst of static followed. Then something that sounded like breathing. Then nothing. The radio went silent. The playlist didn't resume. The power flickered. And outside, through the tiny station window, I saw Jerry step onto the porch, and he was looking up. "Jerry!" I shot up from my chair so fast that my knees slammed against the control panel. The station's fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting jagged shadows across the room. Jerry stood in the doorway, his back to me. The glass door leading outside was open just a crack, letting in a sliver of the cold night air. I could see the faint glow of his cigarette between his fingers, but he wasn't moving. "Hey!" I tried again, louder. "Get back inside, man." Nothing. A tight knot formed in my stomach. Something about the way he stood, too still, too rigid, made my instincts scream. I took a hesitant step toward him. "Jerry!" Then he tilted his head upward. The moment he did, every hair on my body stood on end. From where I stood, I couldn't see the sky. The awning above the station entrance blocked most of it, but I didn't need to see it. The way Jerry was looking up was wrong. His neck bent at an unnatural angle, his chin raised as far as it could go, his cigarette dangling forgotten from his fingers. He wasn't blinking, wasn't reacting, just staring. I took another step forward and grabbed his shoulder. "Dude, inside. Now." The second I touched him, he jerked violently like a puppet on cut strings. His cigarette tumbled to the ground. His body stiffened. And then, finally, he spoke. "They see us." His voice was wrong, a hollow, whispering rasp, like it was coming from somewhere else. I recoiled. "What?" Jerry shuddered. His whole body twitched, like something was rattling his bones from the inside. Then, slowly, he turned his head toward me, his eyes. I stumbled back so fast I nearly tripped over my own feet. His pupils were huge, swallowing almost all of the color. The whites of his eyes were barely visible, just a thin ring around that endless blackness. His mouth hung slightly open, and I swore I saw his lips moving, forming silent words that made no sound. Then, just as suddenly as it started, he blinked. The darkness in his eyes vanished. Jerry gasped, stumbling back like a drunk man shaking off a bad dream. He grabbed the doorframe, his chest rising and falling in sharp, ragged breaths. "Jesus," he wheezed. "What the hell was that?" I grabbed him by the arm and dragged him inside, slamming the door shut behind us. "You tell me, man," I snapped. "You just walked out there and—" I hesitated, struggling to find the words. What had I just seen? Jerry ran a shaking hand over his face. I don't know. I heard the alert again. I thought I saw something outside. And then, he swallowed hard. I don't know. I didn't believe him. Not entirely, because the way he was staring at the sky, that wasn't just zoning out. That wasn't just spacing. It was like something had grabbed him from the inside and held him there. I opened my mouth to say something. Something about his eyes, the way he'd whispered about them seeing us. But then the radio crackled. We both froze. The station had been silent since the emergency alert played. But now, the speakers hissed with static, breaking through the stillness like a voice clearing its throat. I hurried back to the control panel, adjusting the frequency. "KXRF, you're on the air." "Who's calling?" First, nothing. Just that eerie, wavering hiss of white noise. Then, a voice, soft, strained, distant. "Help, please." I sat up straighter. "Hello? Can you repeat that?" The voice was barely audible, like the person on the other end was speaking from miles away. The sky, don't look." Jerry and I exchanged a glance. "What's your location?" I pressed. "Outside of town, near the old train yard." A ragged gasp. "They took Mitch." He looked up and the voice cut out. Static swallowed the transmission whole. I stared at the radio in stunned silence. Jerry swallowed. "Dude, what the hell is happening?" I didn't answer. I was too busy checking the station window, because Jerry wasn't the only one acting strange tonight. I could see the gas station down the road. It was closed, the lights off, but something about it was wrong. There was a man standing outside, not moving, not blinking, just staring at the sky. The next emergency alert played at 1:30 a.m. The station lights dimmed as the radio crackled to life again, filling the room with that deep, pulsing beep. The voice that followed was warped, glitched, like a recording being chewed up and spit out by something not meant to speak. "This is an emergency alert, issued by the National Weather Service. Do not look at the sky. Do not look at the sky. Do not look at the sky." The words repeated, again and again, faster each time. The voice grew more garbled, distorted beyond recognition. Then a sound, low, humming, not from the radio, not from the speakers, from outside. Jerry and I turned at the same time. The man at the gas station? He wasn't alone anymore, for others stood beside him now, motionless, staring up. A car rolled through the intersection, its headlights sweeping across them. For one awful second, I saw their faces. Their eyes were completely black. The car passed, and the darkness swallowed them again. I didn't breathe, didn't move. The radio screeched, then silence. The emergency alert stopped. I turned back to Jerry, my throat dry. "Lock the doors," I whispered. He didn't argue. As he hurried to the entrance, I grabbed my phone and started typing a text to my sister, who lived a few states over. "Just in case. Something's wrong here. If you hear anything about the stars, don't go outside." I hesitated, then added one more thing. "If you get an emergency alert, don't trust it." The emergency alert had stopped, but the silence it left behind was worse. Jerry locked the doors, checking them twice before backing away. His hands were shaking. "What the hell is going on?" he whispered. I didn't answer. My eyes were glued to the gas station down the road. There were now 6 people standing in the empty parking lot. 6 unmoving figures, their faces tilted toward the sky. My stomach twisted. Had they been there before? Had they always been there, standing in the dark, while Jerry and I focused on the emergency alert? The longer I watched, the more I realized something else. They were perfectly spaced apart, not random, not clustered, deliberately arranged, like markers on a grid. I grabbed Jerry's arm, pulling him away from the window. "We need to stay inside. Whatever's happening, it's spreading." Jerry ran a hand over his face. "Jesus, man." First the alert, then that caller, now this. He gestured toward the window. "They look like They look like they're in some kind of trance. I didn't want to tell him about what I saw when the car headlights passed, about their eyes. Instead, I checked my phone. No service. Of course, I opened the station's landline and dialed 911. Nothing, not even a busy signal. I set the receiver down slowly, like it might explode in my hands. The lines were dead. 1:47 a.m. The humming outside hadn't stopped. It was low, almost imperceptible, but it was there. A distant, vibrating sound that made my teeth itch. Every few minutes, I'd glance out the window. The people in the gas station parking lot hadn't moved. They were still staring. "Okay," Jerry said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Okay, maybe it's some kind of mass hysteria thing. Or carbon monoxide leak. Or something's messing with people," I muttered. "Something that starts when they look up." Jerry laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "That's insane." I didn't argue, because deep down he knew it too. Something was wrong with the stars.
2:04 nachts.
The phone rang. I nearly jumped out of my skin. Jerry and I stared at each other. The landline hadn't been working a few minutes ago. Slowly, I picked it up. "Hello," static. And then, "It's inside." The voice was too familiar. I sat up straighter. "Who is this?" A ragged breath. "I saw it." "I looked too long, please." Recognition slammed into me. The caller from before. The one who said his neighbor wouldn't move. "Where are you?" I demanded. No answer. Just shaky breathing. Then a horrible wet sound, like something peeling away from flesh. I sucked in a breath, heart hammering. "Are you safe? What's inside?" Finally, he whispered, "Not the sky. It's in the dark, too." The line went dead. I slowly set the receiver down. Jerry was watching me, pale as death. "What did they say?" I licked my lips. They said it's not just the sky." Jerry exhaled sharply, pacing the studio. "No, man. No. This is some kind of sick prank. There's no way." Bang. We both froze. The noise had come from outside. A single, sharp thud against the metal door. Jerry and I didn't move. Another bang. Louder this time. Then, something even worse. A voice. "Ryan." My stomach dropped. The voice was wrong. Low, distorted, like it was being dragged through a bad radio frequency. "Ryan, let me in." I staggered backward, because I knew that voice. I knew it too well. Jerry's expression twisted. "Who the hell is that?" I couldn't answer, because that wasn't possible. That voice belonged to my sister, but my sister was hundreds of miles away.
2:21 nachts.
Neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. The voice kept calling my name, but I refused to answer. Eventually, it stopped, and that silence was worse. I checked outside again. The people at the gas station, they were closer, no longer in the parking lot, now standing in the road.
2:45 nachts.
The humming grew louder. It wasn't just a sound anymore. I felt it, a deep, thrumming pressure in my chest, pressing against my ribs like something inside me wanted to get out. Jerry was gripping the desk, knuckles white. His breathing was uneven, and I knew he felt it too. "We can't stay here," he muttered. "We can't leave." I shot back. He gave a humorless laugh. "So what? We just sit here till morning." I didn't know how to answer that, because something told me morning wouldn't come. 3:12 a.m. Jerry started muttering to himself. I barely noticed at first. My focus was on the radio, desperately cycling through frequencies, searching for anything that made sense. But then I realized he wasn't muttering. He was repeating, over and over under his breath, "They see us. They see us. They see us." A deep chill ran through me. "Jerry," I whispered. He didn't answer. He just kept repeating. I reached out, placing a hand on his shoulder.
"Hey, Mann."
Snap out of. Jerry whipped around, and his eyes, completely black.
"No wait."
No irises, just pools of darkness. My breath hitched. "Jerry." His mouth trembled, his jaw clenched. And then, in a voice not his own, "Too late now." Then he lunged. Jerry lunged. I barely had time to react. His fingers clawed at my throat, nails digging into my skin as he forced me backward. My chair tipped over, sending me sprawling onto the station floor. My head hit the ground hard, stars bursting in my vision. not real ones. Not the ones outside. Jerry, I choked out. Snap out of it, but he wasn't listening. His face was twisted in a grotesque mask of rage. His lips curled back, his blackened eyes locked onto mine with a hunger that wasn't human. His breathing came in ragged gasps, his chest heaving like he was fighting something inside himself. His hands tightened around my throat. I kicked upward, slamming my knee into his ribs. He barely reacted. The humming in the air grew louder, deep, vibrating. Inside my skull, I reached out, fingers scrambling across the floor, searching anything. My hand closed around something cold and heavy. The metal mic stand. I didn't think. I just swung. The base of the stand cracked against Jerry's temple. A wet, sickening sound. He reeled back. It was only for a second, but it was enough. I rolled away, coughing, scrambling to my feet as Jerry collapsed onto all fours. His body convulsed. A horrible, retching noise tore from his throat. Then, to my absolute horror, he started whispering, fast, incoherent. A constant, unbroken stream of words spilling from his lips like static from a dying radio. I backed away. Jerry, he didn't look at me. His fingernails scraped against the floor as his body twitched, his limbs moving like they weren't fully his anymore. The whispers grew louder. Then he lurched forward. I ran. I barreled down the hallway, throwing open the station's break room door and slamming it shut behind me. My hands shook as I fumbled with the lock, twisting it into place just as Jerry's body collided with the other side. Bang! I pressed myself against the door, trying to keep my breathing quiet. The humming was still there, vibrating in the walls, in my teeth, in my skull. And Jerry, he was laughing, quiet, choking laugh. Then a single, clear whisper. They're almost here. The blood in my veins turned to ice. Bang! Another hit against the door. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to focus. The break room wasn't big, just a small, windowless space with a vending machine, a couch, and a table cluttered with old coffee cups. I needed a plan. Fast. My eyes landed on the emergency exit door. No, too risky. If I went outside, if I saw the sky, no way. I had to wait it out, at least until I knew what was happening to Jerry. I pressed my ear to the door, listening. The humming was changing. The pitch was shifting, twisting, like it was saying something. And then everything stopped. No more banging, no more laughing, no more humming, just silence. I swallowed, every instinct screaming at me to stay put. But my gut was screaming something else. Move. Now, I took a deep breath, gripping the door handle. Then I opened it. Jerry was gone. The hallway was empty, but something felt wrong. The air was heavy, charged, like the station itself was watching me. I moved carefully, heart pounding as I stepped into the hall. My breath hitched.
Wet footprints.
Leading away from the door, leading toward the front lobby. I followed them. Every step felt wrong, like I was walking deeper into something I wasn't supposed to see. And then I reached the control room, and I saw Jerry. He was standing by the window, his back to me, motionless, staring outside. Jerry! My voice was barely a whisper. He didn't react, didn't move. I swallowed hard, stepping closer. His head tilted slightly, like he was listening to something just out of reach. Then he spoke, but it wasn't his voice. It was the emergency alert voice. This is a broadcast from the National Weather Service. The following message is issued as an emergency warning for all residents in the affected area. I took a step back. My skin crawled. Jerry's lips weren't moving. The voice was coming from his chest. He continued, "Do not look at the sky. Do not look at the sky. Do not." The voice glitched. Jerry twitched violently, and then his head snapped around. Too fast. Too inhuman. His black eyes locked onto mine. I ran.
3:48 Uhr nachts.
I barricaded myself in the station's storage room. Outside, Jerry moved through the halls. Slow. Deliberate. He wasn't knocking anymore, just pacing and whispering. I pressed my forehead to my knees, trying to breathe. Something was happening to people who saw the sky. Something was changing them. And Jerry, he was gone. Whatever was left wasn't Jerry anymore. Then the radio crackled. Even through the storage room walls, I could hear it. A new emergency alert. But this time, the message was different. This is an emergency broadcast from the federal government. Do not look out windows. Do not go outside. If someone you know is behaving strangely, do not engage. Avoid all eye contact. Do not attempt to leave. Help is not coming. I stopped breathing. That last line, it hadn't said help will arrive soon. It said help is not coming, which meant we were already too late. 3:50 a.m. I sat in the storage room, my back pressed against the cold metal shelves. My fingers trembled as I listened to the radio. Help is not coming. The words echoed in my head, sinking deep into my bones. I gritted my teeth, trying to breathe through the fear. What did that mean? Had they already given up? Were they watching this happen from somewhere safe while the rest of us? No. Stop. Focus. I had to think. Had to survive. The only thing I knew for sure was that whatever was outside wasn't the stars anymore. It was inside too. Jerry was proof of that. My fingers curled into fists. Jerry, was he still out there? I hadn't heard him in a while. That made it worse. 3:56 a.m. The emergency lights flickered. A low click sounded outside the door. I froze. Footsteps. Slow. Unnatural. My heart slammed against my ribs. A shadow passed under the door. I clamped a hand over my mouth, forcing myself to stay still. The footsteps stopped. I waited. Silence. And then a voice. Not Jerry's. Something else. Ryan. I squeezed my eyes shut. No. No, no, no. I knew that voice. It was my sister. But it couldn't be. She was hundreds of miles away. A slow, deliberate knock at the door. Ryan. The voice was wrong. Distorted. Stretched too thin. Let me in. I stayed silent. The voice giggled. Are you hiding? I dug my nails into my palms. Silence. Then a wet scraping sound against the door, like fingernails dragging down metal. I swallowed hard. Don't react. Don't move. Pause. Then the voice whispered, so soft I almost didn't hear it. They see you. And just like that, the footsteps moved away. 4:10 a.m. I didn't move for a long time. The humming in the air had changed. No longer distant. Now it felt like it was inside my skull. I checked my phone. Still no service. The only sound was the faint buzz of the emergency lights and my own ragged breathing. I had two choices. Stay here until whatever was outside found me, or run. I took a slow, shuddering breath. Then I unlocked the door. The station was too quiet. I stepped carefully into the hallway, my heart pounding in my ears. The humming was louder now, like something was whispering just beneath it. I had to find a way out. I had to get far away from this place. But then I saw it and my stomach dropped. The front door was open, just a crack. Cold air seeped in from outside, and standing just past the threshold was Jerry, his back to me, still unmoving, the way he'd been before when he was staring at the stars. A deep chill crawled up my spine. Jerry? I whispered. He didn't react, didn't even twitch, but something felt wrong, like I wasn't looking at a person anymore, like I was looking at a shadow wearing Jerry's skin. And then his head turned, too far, too fast. His black eyes locked onto mine, and he smiled. I ran, not outside, not toward the sky, back into the darkness of the station. Footsteps pounded behind me, faster than human. I threw myself into the control room, slamming the door shut. Jerry hit the other side, hard. The whole frame shook. I backed away, my hands scrambling for anything I could use as a weapon. He was laughing again, a slow, choked sound, like something was clawing its way out of his throat. Then his voice changed. Ryan, not his voice, not anymore. Look outside. My breath caught, and then the radio crackled. Another alert. But this time, I wasn't sure if it was coming from the speakers or from Jerry. This is your final warning. Stay inside. Avoid all reflections. Do not look at the sky. Do not look at them. Do not let them see you. My pulse thundered. Reflections. I turned toward the glass window of the control room, and I saw them. There were dozens of them, figures standing in the road, more than before, lined up, perfectly spaced, unmoving, all facing the radio station, facing me. My stomach twisted. No, they weren't just staring. They were watching, like they'd been waiting for me to look. A fresh wave of nausea rolled through me. Their faces were wrong, like static, blurry, shifting, impossible to focus on. Like they weren't just people. Like they weren't even real. The humming in the air grew deafening. I clamped my hands over my ears, but it was inside me now. And in the window, one of the figures moved. Not forward, not closer. It lifted a hand and waved, like it knew me, like it was saying hello. A cold, paralyzing terror washed over me, because I finally understood. The emergency alerts, the warnings, the things outside, they weren't just watching us. They were learning, and now they knew I could see them.
4:30 Uhr nachts.
I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The figures outside stood perfectly still, their faces shifting, blurring, like static on a broken screen. But one of them had waved at me, like it knew me, like it had been waiting for me to notice it. I backed away from the control room window, my heartbeat hammering in my ears. The air was thick, charged with something unnatural. And behind me, Jerry's voice, still not his own. "They see you." I spun around. Jerry was right outside the control room door, his blackened eyes locked onto mine through the reinforced glass. His mouth was moving, but his lips didn't match the words, like he was a puppet speaking something else's language. The emergency alert kept repeating, but now the voice was wrong. It wasn't robotic anymore. It sounded distorted, organic, like someone was forcing it out through broken vocal cords. "Do not look at them. Do not let them see you. Do not attempt to leave. Help is not coming." I backed away. Jerry tilted his head. Slow. Too slow. Then he whispered, "Turn it off." My stomach twisted. I knew what he meant. The broadcast. The emergency alerts weren't just warnings anymore. They were pulling something in. Or someone. 4:35 a.m. I forced myself to move. The control panel was flashing. Static hissed through the speakers. The emergency alert was on a loop, playing the same message over and over. Jerry slammed his palm against the glass. Thump. I flinched. "Ryan," he rasped, his voice breaking. "Turn it off." I stared at him, my chest tight. His face was pale, his veins dark like ink spreading beneath his skin. His eyes were wrong, but there was something else, something fighting to get out. For a split second, I thought I saw Jerry again. The real Jerry, not this thing wearing his body. I reached for the control panel. My fingers hesitated over the buttons. If I cut the signal, would it stop all of this? Or would it make things worse? My hands shook as I hovered over the switch. And then the radio static shifted. It wasn't just white noise anymore. It was a voice, a deep, crackling voice, layered over itself, like 100 people whispering at once. "We see you." I froze. Jerry's breathing hitched. "We see you, Ryan." My blood ran cold. They had said my name. The lights flickered. Jerry shuddered, tensed. Then he slammed his head against the glass. Hard. Crack. A thin fracture split across the window. He lifted his head. Blood trickled from his forehead, but he was smiling. A wide, awful grin. "Too late," he whispered. Then the power cut out. 4:40 a.m. The entire station went black. I couldn't see my own hands. The humming in the air was deafening now, like it was coming from inside my own skull. The figures outside, I knew they were still there, watching, waiting, and now I wasn't sure if they were outside anymore. My breath came in shallow gasps. I reached for my phone, fumbling to turn on the flashlight, but the screen was dead. No service, no battery, nothing. A sound echoed through the darkness. A slow, deliberate creaking noise, like a door opening. But I had locked every door. Hadn't I? Something moved in the room with me. A slow, shuffling sound. I backed away, my hands trembling. I reached for anything. My fingers closed around a metal flashlight on the desk. I switched it on. The beam cut through the dark, and I saw the reflection. Not in the window, not in a mirror, in the glass of the control panel. And it wasn't mine.
4:42 Uhr nachts.
I turned, and something was standing behind me, tall, unmoving. Too many arms, too many eyes. The shape flickered like a broken signal. I couldn't see its face. It was just shifting static, glitching in and out of reality. But I felt it, watching me, studying me. "Don't look." The voice was inside my own head. The flashlight flickered, and then the figure moved, not like a person, like frames of a corrupted video, jumping between positions. I stumbled backward, my breath caught in my throat. It wasn't attacking me. It was learning me, copying me. The lights flickered back on. For half a second, the figure was gone, like it had never been there. But I knew better. I felt it still, somewhere, waiting, watching, and then the radio crackled again. A new voice. This is a message from the United States government. Remain calm. A solution is in progress. If you are experiencing hallucinations, paranoia, or intrusive thoughts, do not engage. They are not real. They cannot hurt you. My mouth went dry. They were lying. I had seen them. I had felt them. And now they had seen me too. 4:50 a.m. I don't know how much time I have left. The humming hasn't stopped. It's still there. Louder. Closer. The figures outside. They haven't moved. But now there are more of them. Lining the road. Lining the edges of the station. Waiting. I don't know what happens next. But I know one thing. This isn't over. Not yet. Not for me. And not for anyone else who's still listening.
4:55 nachts.
The figures outside weren't moving. But I knew they weren't just standing there. They were doing something. Waiting. Watching. There were more now. Dozens, no hundreds. Their blurry, static-covered faces all turned toward me, like I was the one on display. The emergency broadcast kept repeating, but I wasn't sure if it was even from the government anymore. The voice was off, too stretched, too slow, like it had been altered. Remain calm. A solution is in progress. Do not attempt to leave. I wanted to laugh. Do not attempt to leave, like I had a choice.
4:58 nachts.
I wasn't alone in the station. I didn't hear it move, didn't hear footsteps, but I felt it. Something was here, something big. The air was thick, charged with an energy that felt wrong, like the pressure before a storm, or before a signal comes through. The control panel flickered. I turned, and there, a shape in the doorway. It was wearing Jerry's uniform, but it wasn't Jerry anymore. The shape was too tall, too thin. Its arms were wrong, elongated, distorted, and its face, it wasn't a face at all. It was a black void, shifting like television static. Ryan, it knew my name. Its voice wasn't Jerry's anymore. It wasn't even human. It was a signal, a voice being broadcast from something else, something far above us. I clenched my fists. What do you want? I whispered. The thing tilted its head. Its static face flickered, and then spoke again. But this time, it wasn't using my name. It was using my voice.
5 Uhr morgens.
Ryan, the thing echoed me, repeating my words, my tone, copying me, studying me. It was learning. I took a step back, my heart hammering. The control panel behind me flashed erratically. The emergency alert changed. The robotic voice was gone. Now, a new voice crackled through the speakers. Frequencies compromised. The broadcast is not secure. Do not listen. Do not let them in. My stomach twisted. Too late. I had already heard it. We all had.
5:03 morgens.
The air rippled, like a stone dropped into water. The station flickered. For a split second, I wasn't in the control room anymore. I was somewhere else. Cold, dark place. A place where the stars weren't just stars. They were watching me, and in that moment, I understood. The emergency alerts hadn't been warnings. They had been invitations. The government hadn't been trying to protect us. They had been trying to contain the signal, to keep us from responding. But now, it was too late. The signal had been received, and something from beyond the stars was answering back.
5:05 morgens.
The station lights exploded. Glass shattered. A high-pitched whine tore through the air. I collapsed to my knees, clutching my ears. The emergency broadcast dissolved into raw static, and behind it, something else was speaking. Not in words, not in any language I could understand, but I felt it. Presence, cold, endless, hungry, looking through me.
No.
Looking through all of us. The signal had been sent. The signal had been answered, and now they were coming.
5:07 morgens.
I forced myself to stand. The thing wearing Jerry's uniform was still there, watching, waiting. The static face flickered, twisted, mimicking me, repeating me. But now, it wasn't alone. The figures outside were moving. For the first time, they were walking toward the station. All of them, at the same time, in perfect, synchronized steps. A shudder ran through me. They weren't people. They never had been. They were something else. A signal, a transmission. And now they were here.
5:10 morgens.
I had one chance. I didn't know if it would work, didn't know if it would even matter, but I had to try. I lunged for the control panel. My fingers flew over the switches. The emergency broadcast was still running, still transmitting. If I could cut it off, maybe, just maybe, I could stop the signal before it fully opened the door. I flipped the final switch. The radio cut out. Silence. Terrible, suffocating silence. And then a whisper inside my own head. "We see you." The static thing in Jerry's uniform smiled. And outside, the sky split open.
5:11 morgens.
I had cut the signal. The radio was silent. But outside, the sky was breaking apart. I don't know how to explain it. It wasn't just splitting. It was unraveling, like a glitch in reality itself. Darkness bled through the cracks, stretching like jagged veins across the sky. Not the darkness of night, something deeper, colder. The stars inside it weren't stars. They were eyes. They blinked, flickering like distant radio waves, watching everything below. And then something stepped through.
5:12 morgens.
A shape descended from the sky. It wasn't falling. It wasn't flying. It was just there. 1 second, the sky was empty. The next, it stood in the air, its form shifting, undulating like a corrupted signal. Too many arms, too many eyes, and behind it, the others. More shapes, more impossible beings, stretching through the broken sky, crawling into our world like a transmission forcing its way through static. I stumbled backward, my chest tight with panic. I had cut the broadcast. I had turned it off. So why were they still coming? 5:14 a.m. The figures outside the station stopped moving. Hundreds of them, standing in perfect rows, like an audience waiting for something to begin. And then, in unison, they looked up, their blurred, featureless heads tilted toward the sky, toward the thing above us. And I swear to God, they smiled, not with mouths, but with something deeper, like they were welcoming it, like this had been the plan all along. A sickening thought crept into my mind. The emergency broadcast didn't bring them here. It had just been the announcement. They were already coming. They had always been coming. And now they had arrived.
5:16 morgens.
A low vibration rippled through the air. Not sound, something worse. It crawled into my bones, buzzing through my skull like I was a radio antenna picking up the wrong frequency. My vision blurred. For a split second, I saw something else. The world behind the signal. Dark towers stretching into an empty void. A sky that breathed. A place where time didn't exist. And in the center of it all, a massive, shifting form. Waiting, watching, reaching for us. The vision snapped away. I collapsed to my knees, gasping for air. The static hum was everywhere now. Growing, expanding. I wasn't just hearing it, I was becoming it. 5:18 a.m. The thing wearing Jerry's uniform moved toward me. Slow, deliberate steps. It wasn't copying me anymore. It had learned enough. It knew what it needed. Now it was changing. I could hear its body crackling, twisting, becoming something closer to the things above. "We see you, Ryan." I squeezed my eyes shut. "Don't look. Don't let them in." The words from the emergency alert echoed in my skull. Too late. I had already let them in. And now, they weren't just here for me. They were here for all of us. 5:20 a.m. The first screams echoed from town. The figures outside the station turned toward the sound. And then, they moved. Not walking, not running. They just glitched forward, disappearing and reappearing in jerking motions, heading straight toward the town, like a corrupted video skipping frames. And I knew everyone was already infected, not in their bodies, in their minds. They had heard the signal, they had looked up, and now it was too late.
5:22 morgens.
The emergency alert came back, but now it was different. A new voice, more urgent. "This is a final warning. Do not engage with them. Do not respond to the voices. Find shelter. Stay inside. The sky is compromised. Do not watch the stars." I let out a ragged breath. They knew. The government had been trying to stop this, to keep us from hearing the signal, from looking up, but we had already failed. I turned toward the doorway. The Jerry thing was gone. Outside, the figures had reached the edge of town, and above them, the sky kept splitting open, letting more of them through. The stars weren't stars anymore. They were holes, windows into somewhere else. somewhere we were never meant to see, and now we couldn't unsee it. 5:25 a.m. I had to move. I didn't know where to go, didn't know if anywhere was safe anymore, but staying here, watching this happen, couldn't. I grabbed a flashlight and bolted for the back exit. The door groaned open. The air outside was electric, buzzing with unseen frequencies. My ears rang. The ground felt wrong beneath my feet, like I was walking on a transmission instead of solid earth. In the distance, the first buildings went dark. One by one, the town was losing power, and the sky above it was still breaking apart. 5:28 a.m. I ran. I didn't know if I was running toward safety or straight into their arms, but it didn't matter, because I wasn't running to escape. I was running to warn someone, anyone, if there was still anyone left to warn, because I knew the truth now. The emergency broadcasts, they had been trying to help, trying to keep the signal contained, but we had listened too long. We had watched too much, and now the stars were watching back. 5:30 a.m. I ran until my lungs burned. The world around me wasn't right anymore. The air felt heavier, distorted, like I was moving through a bad transmission, my body lagging just behind reality. The sky was still peeling apart, layer by layer, unraveling into a void of moving shadows and blinking, watching things. The town ahead was going dark, house by house, street by street, like the power grid was collapsing, or something was shutting it off, and I wasn't the only one who noticed. 5:32 a.m. The first gunshots rang out, not from the figures in the streets, from people. The town was fighting back. For a brief, desperate moment, I thought maybe there was still a chance. Then the screaming started. I saw it happen, saw a man, his rifle shaking in his grip, firing at the shadows moving toward him. The bullet hit, and the thing glitched. His body flickered, like a signal struggling to maintain form. Then it corrected itself and kept coming. It was never physical. It was never something bullets could stop. And when it reached him, he froze. For a full second, he stood there, body rigid, head tilted up toward the sky. Then he started laughing, not in terror, not in pain, in understanding. And then, just like that, he wasn't him anymore. His body remained, but his face, his eyes, they weren't eyes anymore. They were static. And I realized the town wasn't fighting back. It was losing.
5:35 morgens.
A new emergency alert crackled over my radio. Attention! This is a national emergency. Do not look at the sky. Do not respond to the signal. Containment teams are inbound. Containment teams. They had known for a long time, and now they were coming to seal this off. I had to get out. I had to move now.
5:38 morgens.
I cut through an alley. The town was quieter now. The screaming had mostly stopped, not because it was over, but because most people had already changed. I passed a gas station. A woman stood near the pumps, motionless, her head tilted toward the sky, watching, mouth slightly open, lips moving, like she was listening to something or speaking back. I didn't stop. I didn't dare. I just kept running, because the emergency broadcast had said one more thing, something I couldn't ignore. Containment teams are inbound. I knew what that meant. They weren't coming to save us. They were coming to erase us.
5:40 morgens.
A low, distant rumbling shook the ground. Then a new light appeared in the sky, not from the stars, not from the things crawling through, from jets, high-altitude military aircraft, moving in formation, dropping something. I barely had time to react before the first explosion hit. The shockwave knocked me off my feet. A bright, white-hot flash erupted over the center of town, and then another, and another. They were firebombing the entire area, burning it to the ground. I gasped for breath, forcing myself upright. I had to keep moving, had to get out of the blast zone, had to. Then I saw them, the figures in the streets, standing still, not moving, not running, just watching the flames consume the town, and smiling.
5:42 morgens.
A low hum filled the air. The figures began to shift, not walking, glitching. Their forms stretched and flickered, blending with the static still bleeding into our world. They weren't afraid of the fire. They weren't trying to escape. They were waiting for something else, for something bigger. And then the sky ripped open completely.
5:45 morgens.
I didn't look. couldn't, but I felt it. Something immense, vast, and endless beyond comprehension. A presence so overwhelming that my brain couldn't process it, like trying to understand the entire electromagnetic spectrum at once. And then, a voice, not from the radio, not from the emergency alert, from inside my own head. We were never the ones watching. You were. And now, you see, my breath caught. I realized the broadcasts weren't warnings. They were cover-ups, a desperate attempt to control the spread, to keep people from looking too long. Because if you see them, they see you back. And once they do, they never stop watching. 5:47 a.m. A deep, thunderous roar rippled through the burning town. A final signal burst from the sky, a wave of raw, static noise so loud it felt like my bones were vibrating apart. The last thing I saw before I blacked out was the figures dissolving into pure signal, uploading themselves, becoming one with the transmission. And then everything went dark. 5:50 a.m. I woke up to the sound of helicopters. The town was gone, nothing left but ash and fire. The emergency broadcast was silent now. No more warnings, no more signals, just static. And in that moment, I understood. The emergency alert system had done its job. It had contained the event, at least for now. But the truth? The signal isn't gone. It's still out there, still waiting for someone to listen. And if you watch the stars too long, they'll start watching you back. 5:52 a.m. The town was gone. Everything that had been there, buildings, streets, people, was now a smoldering wasteland. The sky above was still broken, but the shapes had retreated, slipping back into the void beyond the stars. For now, I could still hear the hum, low and constant, beneath the crackling of distant flames. A reminder, the signal wasn't gone. It had just moved on.
5:55 morgens.
A helicopter circled overhead. Military.
No markings.
The kind of craft that wasn't supposed to exist. A containment team. They weren't coming to rescue survivors. They were coming to erase evidence. I needed to leave. Now, I forced myself to my feet, muscles aching, head pounding from the aftermath of the signal surge. The emergency alert had gone silent. No more updates, no more warnings, just a dead transmission, which meant one thing: the event was over, or at least that's what they wanted people to believe.
5:58 morgens.
I kept moving. The edges of town were still intact, but the closer I got, the less real everything felt. Like I was walking through a space between frequencies, like the signal had imprinted itself into reality, or into me. I kept seeing glitches at the corners of my vision, buildings that weren't supposed to be there, shadows of people who had already burned away, ghosts of a world overwritten. Then ahead, a checkpoint, temporary fencing, military vehicles. They had sealed off the town. No one was getting in or out.
6 Uhr morgens.
I hid behind a collapsed billboard, watching the containment teams move in. They weren't just soldiers, they were specialists. I saw them carrying devices I didn't recognize. Not weapons, scramblers, signal disruptors. They weren't just here to kill survivors. They were here to wipe the event from existence. One soldier lifted a handheld scanner, sweeping it over the area. A small, distorted voice crackled from the device. Residual transmission detected. The soldier stiffened. A second later, his radio crackled to life. Confirmed signal traces. Possible exposure. Deploy countermeasures. I watched as they activated the scramblers. A pulse rippled through the air. A deafening shockwave of silence. And just like that, the glitches disappeared. The hum in my skull dimmed. It was like they were deleting the signal itself.
6:03 morgens.
I knew what would happen next. I had seen how this worked. Containment wasn't about stopping the spread. It was about erasing anyone who knew the truth. I needed to get past them. I checked my surroundings. A storm drain, partially collapsed, leading under the checkpoint. It was my only way out. I dropped down, crawling through the rubble, staying low. Behind me, the soldiers continued their sterilization protocol. I heard the click of suppressed gunfire. A soft, wet impact. A body falling. Someone else had survived, but not for long. I gritted my teeth, forcing myself forward. If I didn't make it out, I'd be next.
6:07 morgens.
I emerged past the checkpoint. The road ahead stretched into the hills, away from town. I was almost free. Then my radio crackled. Not a military frequency, not a normal station, something else. Faint, broken voice. This is not over. They cannot erase us. The signal remains. I stared at the radio. The broadcast was still active. Somewhere, someone else was still transmitting. And the moment I heard it, the hum in my skull returned. The glitches flickered at the edges of my vision. They weren't done with me.
6:10 morgens.
I kept walking. No more helicopters, no more gunshots, just the road, stretching into the dark. But I knew this wasn't over. Not for me, not for anyone who had heard the signal. Because once you tune in, once you see the truth, you can't turn it off. The stars are still watching. And now I can hear them watching too. Final emergency broadcast. At 6:15 a.m., a final emergency alert was issued nationwide. The situation has been contained. There is no further risk to public safety. But I know the truth. This was never about containment. It was about cover-up. The sky isn't ours anymore. It never was. And one day soon, the signal will return. And when it does, no emergency alert will be enough to stop it.